All right. Good morning, folks. Tara here with another Wifey Wake Up No Makeup podcast. And let's see here. Looks like Twitter didn't get the message today to go live. Wake up, Twitter, also, or X. And, we'll keep on going. So, as you see, today we're talking about why I didn't divorce my husband after bankruptcy, and I'm going to share why. So, yesterday, John and I were doing our John and Tara podcast, which we do every week. We talk as a couple and all sorts of things business, life, all sorts of topics, but especially business and life. And one of the topics that came up, that has come up a number of times in our own podcast, which is the bankruptcy that we went through. Now, believe me, this is not something that's easy to talk about. It has gotten easier, but for a couple of years, I mean, hardly anyone knew because, of course, especially I think in our society, that's something to be very ashamed of. A lot of us would consider it so, and it certainly was for us. But here's my point. Here's what I'm getting at. Divorce wasn't even an option when we went through the bankruptcy. It wasn't a time where I was like, well, am I going to stay with him or am I not? Or is this my chance to get out? Or is this my reason to get out? It wasn't even an option. It only came into the conversation because after the whole bankruptcy was done and everything, our attorney said to my husband, he said, so how are things going with you and Tara? And John was like, good. Why? And he said, you're the first couple that has ever not gotten a divorce after bankruptcy that he had worked with. And he had been a bankruptcy attorney for quite a while. So that's how the word even came into play. Why it even, we weren't talking about it. I wasn't considering it. So that's number one. Number two, I mean, that's just number one, why even talk about divorce? Number two, no, actually, this is the number one, actually, of the list, is why I stayed with John is, well, I guess this is number two, because number one, it wasn't an option. It wasn't something I was considering leaving. And number two, I loved him. I do love him still, but I'm talking at the time, right? So, number one, really, on this list is that I love him. And why would I let that come between us? And certainly, I mean, it was a very difficult time, more so emotionally. But why would I let that become between, why would I let that break us apart? There's a time of a lot of contemplation. I spent a lot of time journaling, studying, writing, and one of the main concepts that I came to is that you can replace money, but you can't replace people. At that time, I was already feeling, when you go through bankruptcy, obviously things are challenging to begin with. So I should back up a step. This didn't come out of nowhere. We had a customer not pay us $250,000, which eventually ate up our operating capital. And obviously that's a significant amount of money. And even going to court, getting part of that money back, it was just so much effort. You end up splitting it with your attorneys. And so it was obviously, or maybe not obviously, it was very draining before that time. And as that not getting paid $250,000 is a significant amount of money, and it really stresses the business over time, and then of course stresses the principals in the business as well, which was my husband at the time. And so it was very stressful leading up to that. Then on top of it, the bank, so as a result, we got a line of credit, which is the first time we've ever gotten a line of credit. We'd always operated on cash, or I should say my husband he was really primarily operating the business at that time especially. And he had never used a line of credit before. It wasn't needed. He always operated on cash. And so, not getting paid $250,000, sought out a line of credit for operating expenses. Well, then a couple years into that loan was called, and it was a surprise, first of all. And we had suspected that, there wasn't like good sound reasoning. We were using it as a line of credit, as you do use a line of credit, and everything was within terms. And so it was basically it was out of the blue that this happened. And we recently learned from someone in the financial industry locally that this bank had done this to many businesses in the area. So we were not unique in this. What happened? There were many small businesses that had had these loans called. And so, just a little bit of background. So, what I did during this time that was already really stressful is I really took time to think. Rather than just respond emotionally, I knew that this was a turning point in life, and that how I decided to come out of this was really going to be more important than what was actually going on. And during that time, I had first learned about Jordan Peterson. This was before he really became famous. And I actually learned about him through my husband, John. And I learned about Jordan's self-authoring program. And I decided to purchase it and actually do it. And for anyone who has heard about it, it's all writing. It's writing exercises. And which fortunately I wasn't afraid of, because it was extremely helpful. And the gist of it is that, at least from what I recall, or what was very impactful for me, is you go through and there's past authoring and there's future authoring, which I did both, but particularly the future authoring was what was important here. I'm sure the past was too, because their past shapes us. But the future authoring, this is what I can recall, is that he has you imagine your best possible future and then your worst, right? You have at least two paths that you can take. And if you could create the best possible future for yourself, what would that look like? And more importantly, what I got out of it, and I'm already oriented in this direction, is what can I do about this? Rather than sit back and just, let life happen, I thought to myself, who am I going to be in this next stage of life, in our life together? And because my feeling was, I need to take the reins. I need to take control. I need to do something that, can turn this ship around. But fortunately, what I also realized is that it wasn't just me in the ship. And John was at the helm, particularly of the business and our life. And I wanted to continue to trust and believe in him. I didn't want to take the reins. And I wanted him to still be the leader of our family. And so, but I had a lot of questioning to do, because ultimately I am responsibility of my own life. And so there was a lot of questions I was answering for myself. For example, is this grounds for divorce? After I heard that from the attorney, I was like, well, I hadn't considered that, but is what happened to us grounds for a divorce? And in my mind, no. It's not like John had gambled our money away or was acting irresponsibly. He was trying to build a future for us. And you can't control everything that happens in life. And so in his efforts to do that, to build a future for us, there's some really unfortunate things that happened. And we could learn from those things. It was also what I was hearing from him, right? But I'm just going to speak about myself in this position. So it wasn't his fault that this company hadn't paid the $250,000. And it wasn't his fault that the bank called a loan. Of course, there's a role that he played by being in the situation. But ultimately, from my vantage point, it wasn't, quote, his fault. And I decided that we could learn from this, that we would learn from this, and that it wouldn't be just a cause for a significant reaction like getting like separating. And so once I made that decision, I wanted to figure out how would I be in this next stage of life. And that's where the self-authoring program came in. Now, there's so much more, and that's very, that's going to be unique to everyone. If you did something like that, it's going to be unique to you how you decide to move forward. But I just wanted to give you the highlights, the main points of why I didn't decide to get divorced, why I decided to stay with my husband, and not only that, work towards the future that we wanted. We had to recalibrate, talk about what we learned and what were we going to do next. And then also I was deciding, who was I going to be in this situation? Part of this is that I thought, well, I'm going to have to rebuild anyways, right? Whether I'm together with him or not, I'm going to have to rebuild. And I'm going to go back to point number 1/2 is that I loved him and I do love him. And I knew that we could become better because of this, that it wasn't a breaking point. It was actually a point where we could heal, learn, and move on together. And I didn't want to move on alone. I didn't think that was a viable solution. That's not the solution that I wanted. I wanted to move on along and move forward with him. And I knew that we'd learn from this. I knew that we would rebuild and be better. And if anything, we would be better together because of what we learned and had been through together. And I think it's worth repeating this end point, these bookends, to start with, I loved him, and that's why I decided to stay, and the reasons in between, but end also because I love him. And I did marry him for better or for worse. And he did not do anything intentional, unethical, illegal, immoral. It was just life. And life happens to you whether you're single or you're married. And you can become better through the struggles in life, or you can become bitter, you can move on. But I'm really, really glad that I took that time to really assess what I wanted, but not just what I wanted, but like, who was I going to be in this next era of life? And I'll tell you that, I'll just say again, I'm so glad I did, because I still love John, and I love him even more, and even a more rich and intricate way. And we have become better through it all. And so I hope that helps and inspires you. Please like and subscribe, comment. Have you been through something this challenging and difficult? Was there a decision point that you made a significant, I'm choosing this path, staying with the person that I love, and particularly, like the attorney said, you're the first couple that has stayed together after bankruptcy. So there's like social pressure in a way. Fortunately, I'm not super influenced by social stuff anyways, but fortunately I didn't really see that, because we are affected by social pressures. So anyways, please like, subscribe, share this with a friend you think that this could be helpful for. And I look forward to hearing from you, because these are for you. And what I've learned in 20 some years of marriage that I wish I had known sooner. So if you have a question that's burning, let me know. And take care, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.